Myra's pulse quickened as the flight attendant towered over her, arms folded tightly, voice laced with impatience. "You need to move. Now." A wave of confusion crashed over her. She had booked this seat, business class, paid for in full. Yet the uniformed woman hadn't even bothered to check her ticket. Around her, other passengers averted their eyes, their silence deafening. No one spoke up. No one asked why she, and only she, was being singled out. Clenching the strap of her handbag, Mira swallowed the protest rising in her throat. She could argue, demand to stay where she rightfully belonged, but would it make a difference? Her stomach twisted as she stood. The walk to the economy section felt like a public trial, every step a verdict against her. Humiliation burned through her. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being treated as if she had intruded where she wasn't welcome. Well, the flight attendant didn't know. Myra's uncle owned the airline. An injustice? Well, that was about to be dealt with at 35,000 feet. Mira perched stiffly on the cramped economy seat, gripping her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. The business class ticket had been a gift, her uncle's way of celebrating her first solo trip. And now, she sat here, dismissed without reason. A message popped up on her screen. "Uncle Raj, everything okay? Settled in?" Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Should she tell him? Would he even be able to fix it now that the plane was midair? "Mira, they made me move. Said I wasn't allowed in business class." The response came almost immediately. "Uncle Raj, who told you that?" Her heart pounded. She hesitated, then typed, "Mira, one of the flight attendants." A long pause. "Uncle Raj, what's the flight number?" Up in the front section, the flight attendant, Karen, stirred her tea, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. For her, it had been a routine matter. She had seen enough people try to slip into premium seating before. Another case of someone trying to take what wasn't theirs. But her colleague, Rena, had noticed the tight set of Myra's shoulders, the way her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, the clear sting of embarrassment in her eyes. "Did you check her ticket?" Rena asked quietly. Karen barely looked up. "Didn't need to." Rena's brow furrowed. "I think she had a legitimate business class seat." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Probably a mistake. These things happen." Before Rena could say more, the intercom crackled to life. "Miss Simmons, report to the cockpit immediately." Karen straightened. The captain never summoned crew members unless it was something urgent. Setting down her cup, she smoothed her uniform and strode toward the front, her heels clicking against the aisle floor. Inside the cockpit, Captain Neil Carter sat stiffly, but Karen's eyes were drawn immediately to the screen in front of him. A man's face filled the display, sharp, composed, but his expression carried an unmistakable edge of restrained fury. "Miss Simmons," the voice was low, deliberate. "You removed my niece from her assigned seat." Karen's stomach dropped. "Raj Mehta, CEO of Skylink Airlines. You told her she didn't belong?" He continued, his tone calm but razor sharp. I didn't realize," Karen stammered, her throat dry. Raj didn't let her finish. "Did you ask anyone else in business class to prove they belonged?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She hadn't. "You assumed," Raj said coolly. The full weight of her mistake slammed into her. This wasn't just an oversight. It had been a choice, one rooted in bias. And now, she would have to answer for it. Back in economy, Mira remained oblivious to the unfolding drama in the cockpit. Another text appeared on her phone. "Uncle Raj, stay where you are. I'm handling this." Seconds later, the intercom crackled once more. "Miss Mehta, please return to your original seat in business class." Myra's head shot up. Karen now stood stiffly in the aisle, her voice lower than before. "There was an error. You can return to your original seat." For a long moment, Mira didn't budge. She studied Karen. The way her forced composure barely masked her discomfort, the nervous twitch of her hands. "An error?" Myra's voice was calm, but firm. Karen swallowed. "Yes." Without another word, Mira rose, adjusting the strap of her bag. Her walk back to business class wasn't triumphant. She didn't smirk or gloat, but the energy in the cabin had shifted. Passengers who had earlier watched her leave in silence now looked away, pretending to be absorbed in their own world. Settling in her seat, Mira flipped through the in-flight magazine, not really reading. She was waiting. Karen hovered uncertainly. "Can I get you something to drink?" Myra's gaze flicked up. "You didn't ask me that before." Karen stiffened. "Pardon?" "When I first sat here," Mira said evenly, "you didn't welcome me. You didn't offer me a drink. You didn't treat me like the others." An awkward silence stretched between them. Karen's face flushed slightly. "I apologize." Mira considered her for a moment. "I'll have sparkling water." Karen nodded quickly and returned with the drink, her movements rigid with forced politeness. As she turned to leave, Myra's voice stopped her again. "I messaged my uncle about you." Karen froze. "He wasn't pleased," Mira continued, taking a slow sip from her glass. Karen forced a tight smile. "I see. You'll probably hear more about it when we land." At the front of the cabin, the in-flight phone rang. Karen hesitated before answering, wiping her clammy hands against her skirt. "This is Miss Simmons." Raj Mehta's voice came through the receiver, controlled, steady, but firm. "You will personally document this incident when the flight lands. And for the remainder of this journey, you will ensure my niece receives the same service as every other business class passenger." "Yes, sir." The line went dead with a soft click. When the plane finally touched down, the usual sounds of unbuckling seatbelts filled the cabin. But for Karen, each sharp click echoed like a countdown. She adjusted her scarf and prepared to disembark, only to freeze as a uniformed airline officer stepped onto the plane. He walked past departing passengers until he stopped directly in front of her. "Miss Simmons," he said evenly, "please come with us." A hush fell over the cabin. Karen's stomach twisted. "Is this necessary?" "The airline has requested a formal review of the incident." Passengers whispered as she was escorted off the aircraft. Mira remained seated, her expression unreadable. Weeks later, Karen sat stiffly in the waiting area of Skylink Airlines headquarters, a manila folder clenched in her hands. 3 months of training, uncomfortable conversations, and self-reflection had brought her here. Across the table, Raj Mehta flipped through her file, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Mira sat with her arms crossed. "You completed the training," Raj finally said. "What did you learn?" Karen hesitated. She could recite the company policies, list off diversity training buzzwords, but that wasn't the point. "I learned that I wasn't really seeing people," she admitted. "I thought I was just enforcing rules, but I was deciding who belonged without even realizing it." Mira studied her. "So, if I walked onto your flight tomorrow?" Karen met her gaze. "I'd welcome you." No hesitation. "Because you belong." Mira nodded slightly. Raj closed the file. "You're reinstated." On probation. Karen exhaled, relief washing over her. A second chance, not just at her job, but at being better. Some lessons come easy. Others shake you to your core. But real change? That happens when you choose to be different.